My channel, and today we have a very special guest, Jonathan Singer from Akamai. And today we are kickstarting the session for Gaming Masterclass with our very first series, very first episode in the series called Before they press start. So, Jonathan, could you give a small introduction about what people can expect from this event?
Yeah, sure. So first, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much for working with us. It's been a lot of fun so far, and I'm looking forward to the next month or so of events. And today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of preparing your infrastructure so that when they press start, their game works, right? And that's beyond the core coding of the game, but we're going to talk about a couple key topics today, and then and that'll specifically be CDN. We're going to talk about microservices and both the acceleration and security of those, and then security overall as a topic, because that's something that we at Akamai deal a lot with and feel that we have a lot of knowledge to share. So from there, I'm gonna keep it quick, and then I want to talk to you, and we're going to spend some time chatting about what you've been doing over at Gameon, and then all the topics that I just touch on today, we're going to go in depth on over the course of the next month and a half. We're going to have a bunch of really great sessions with some people who are far more technical than I am. I'll come back, especially for the security discussion. For that one, you'll get to hear a little bit from one of our top security researchers about how the criminal economy works and why you should be worried about it. Well, not worried about it, but why you should pay attention to it and understand it if you're going to launch any type of video game. So that's sort of an overview of what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks. And again, I just really want to thank you for hosting us. I'm really excited for this.
Most welcome. So guys, this gaming masterclass is going to span across a period of 2 months, and that will be several weeks. And in this gaming masterclass, you will get to learn a lot of things about how to improve security of your games, how to manage multiple users, how to manage a concurrent set of millions of users. And Akamai, I believe, is one of the leading partners in this industry who can manage such a big user load very efficiently. So without further ado, Jonathan, please take the stage, and we would love to hear more from about your presentation. So yeah.
I will be happy to. And that requires me to share my screen, which somewhere there's a presentation for. Where did it go? This is pretty much exactly how I expect most live events to go. It's like, oh, where's your presentation, man? Where'd it go? Here it is. Okay. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
And by everyone, I mean you, because yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the last decade and how game development has really changed a lot. Traditionally, and I don't know if I'm on the older side. I'm almost 40, so I've been around. But games were developed and released as standalone experiences for people to play by themselves or on the couch with some friends, right? And now the majority of games really rely on this highly connected architecture in order to support hundreds of thousands or millions of players at the same time, right? And now, if you're in the business of building one of these games and you want to architect a game that wins in the market, right? And particularly in India, mobile first, always on world, you've got to make sure that your game's infrastructure is scalable in case you have a big hit on your hands, has the ability to handle high peak traffic, and protect against all the different security threats that can disrupt your gaming ecosystem. And that's the sort of thing that'll put your players' identities, their accounts, and their money, as well as your money, at risk, right? And so your player's experience now begins before they press start. So the question you should all be asking yourselves is your game ready for this, right? So in India, and wow, I didn't update that stat. That's bigger now. Anyhow, India's gamers are one of the fastest growing gaming populations in the world. And with about over 1.4 billion people, which you know because you live there, 400 million now, not 330, 400 million are playing games. And this is primarily, of course, on mobile devices. So you in the audience have already seen the benefit of this. Your industry is booming and your player bases are expanding exponentially. So now your players, no matter where they are, if they're in a tier 1 market on a high-end device, or if they're in a tier 3 market on a low-end device, they all deserve high quality of service. And now, especially given and I'll speak a little to it right now. The focus in India, there's a big focus on the subvertical of real money gaming, as for all of these experiences, a solid and reliable player experience is absolutely essential, right? And Indian gamers, they're looking for value when they're being asked to pay to play. And so now ensuring that your game is stable and secure, these are really important factors to consider besides just the core gameplay, right? So you want to make sure your game's fun, but if it's fun, that's great, but not as great if they can't access it, right? So gamers and players, they're really highly engaged with this, which is for a lot of them their favorite hobby. And you'll have noticed, if you're not already a part of it, that gamers are pretty vocal, right? They frequently participate in online communities, social media platforms, and they can be very critical when your game is not offering the highest quality experience on every level that they expect, right? So that could be this game isn't fun, or it could be my profile didn't load, the items that I have for my game didn't load properly, it's just not working. I can't even get into the game, right? And especially if you're building mobile games, you know that time to play is essential. Every second that it takes to get into the game, you're losing more of your player base, right? Now, if we look a little bit broader at the greater gaming community, platforms such as YouTube and Twitch, they're reaching audiences of millions of viewers at a global level, let alone all across India. And gamers are watching, they're commenting on esports competitions, and they're playing live, they're doing personal broadcasting, and there are wonderful companies, beyond the global ones here in India, like Rooter Sports, that are providing the same outlet for local games, right? And this in turn is leading more people to play games, is opening up opportunities for other new platforms. So 25 years ago, developing a game was easy, like easier. It wasn't easy, but it was easier. All you needed was a game engine and a piece of hardware. And, when it was time to release, you needed like a disc or a cartridge or a box. You needed some way to get it out physically to people, right? And now you need to think about multiple pieces of gaming infrastructure that power your game and ensure your players can play, right? So if we were to, set up this presentation in kind of a cheesy way with level 1, 2, 3, we'll start here. The first level is digital distribution of games, right? And so step one of this is easy, right? Your gamers rely on app stores, and those are the ones for the biggest smartphone manufacturers to download your game. Now, from that initial download, it's not going to get them that far because you've got updates, you've got patches, you've got level packs, match information, all of that needs to be sent to your audience. And so for that, content delivery becomes one of your first challenges to overcome. So ensuring that you have a scalable content delivery network, or CDN, to deliver your content is a good first step. So an important factor in deciding on your CDN vendor, which I will selfishly say, you should work with Akamai, right? You got to select a CDN that has a high concentration of servers available as close as possible to your end users, right? So having a highly distributed network, having servers at the edge of the internet, that ensures that your users aren't fighting over limited bandwidth between superclusters of cloud servers. And instead, you can cache your content as close to players as possible, right? And this is how Akamai started making its money 20 plus years ago. And it's how, a bulk of our business is still done today, right? And if you look at countries with limited internet access, or areas with limited internet access, this can be one of the make or break moments for your game. Can your player download the newest level pack? Can they update their game properly? This is all stuff you need to be concerned about, right? And if we want to talk about India, again, we'll dive a little deeper here. And that's, where are your players located, right? So again, I touched on it earlier. A major portion of new players in India are coming from tier 2 and tier 3 areas, right? They've got more difficult internet conditions. And the question is your CDN provider even present in those locations, right? Then on top of that, what types of devices do your customers own, right? So lots of the new players can't necessarily afford high-end devices. And instead, they're using more affordable models, right? The kind of like $100 range of smartphones, as I would see it. And a lot of these don't even have 4G access. But these players still require and deserve a high quality experience from your game. And a highly distributed CDN can help you navigate those challenges. So choosing a CDN is kind of level one. We can move on to level two, which is dynamic content and microservices. So the game is installed, they were able to download it, they're ready to play, and they rely on you to provide them with dynamic content, right? Authentication, virtual currency stores, game data, friends lists, matchmaking, multiplayer connectivity, leaderboards. All of these are their own individually connected services, and they're all a key part of your game's infrastructure, right? And we typically bundle these together under microservices. So the majority of games today rely on a mix of internet protocols, HTTPS, UDP, to power your infrastructure. And the microservices that run on these require high scalability, right? So if you can load the game, but you run into an issue because your APIs are overloaded, no one can play your game, right? Now, the same recommendation for your content remains relevant here. So having servers at the edge of the internet can help scale your core origin infrastructure, right? The stuff that you own. And you can offload a lot of the logic, such as authentication and caching and redirects for you, right? And so, you take that stress off and everyone gets better performance. Now, your microservices can consist of API endpoints that get queried, hundreds of thousands of times per second by legitimate games. So it's important, again, for this to be a scalable, reliable API architecture and to take that into consideration when you're architecting a winning game. So if your matchmaking API is unavailable, again, no one can join a match, no one can play a game. And most of the services I just mentioned, if they're unavailable, they're going to disrupt your player experience at best, or at worst, prevent your players from playing at all. And we can talk about this as a problem in mobile. We can also see, where this has been a problem for even AAA studios. There was a major single player game that came out a number of years ago from one of the biggest consoles, in PC studios in the world. And it was just a single player experience, except they allowed people to buy extra bits through a virtual currency store, like new outfits and skins and the like. And at launch, that virtual currency store broke. And it actually broke the entire game, which is bad for a single player game that this other connected piece that wasn't even vital made it unplayable. It was bad news for them. So this is something you really need to take into account. So by going through these first two levels, we've got the core gaming infrastructure design in mind. Now, a highly scalable and well-distributed CDN for both game content and microservices is essential. Now, everything I just described covers the needs for your game posed by legitimate actors, and that's your players. But the question is, what about illegitimate actors, right? Oh, I'm not doing a great job at advancing these slides, am I?
No worries.
Thanks, everyone. I think we're keeping it casual with this presentation today. Let's talk about security threats. And so, with your game now in the hands of hundreds of players, thousands of players, if you're doing really well, millions of players, right? You're on the radar of the many threat actors at play globally. And so I like to talk a lot about security, and I try to do it as much as possible without the FUD, without spreading fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So I'm gonna try to do this without using scare tactics, right? But for simplicity's sake, I just want to break the threat actors down into three different pieces here. Okay, we're going to talk about griefers, we're going to talk about cheaters, and we're going to talk about fraudsters. So we'll start with griefers, and these are players, and they want to disrupt your game, knock it down, and they typically use high volumetric attacks to knock down game servers, right? And these things, they can just pay a couple bucks or even use a free tool like a low orbit ion cannon, and they can just knock down servers, right? And these attacks, they can disconnect your players from their sessions, and that leads to frustration and poor player experience. And if this happens enough times, your players may decide to just go elsewhere, right? And so griefers, they're a pain, and everyone has to deal with them, right? And what they do is they rely on compromised devices across the world, collectively called botnets, and they use these to launch those attacks and swarm your servers with such a high volume of traffic that the resources of your server is completely constrained, completely consumed, and unavailable for legitimate players. And this is the same thing you see when people DOS websites. And now these attacks, they can happen on a variety of protocols that power the internet: DNS, TCP, UDP, HTTPS, and each of these protocols are vulnerable. So that's one piece. The second are cheaters, and you all have to deal with them. And for most games, these are players who really want to get ahead quickly. For real money gaming, they probably want to steal some money too, but they're looking to manipulate game code or microservices to win more. And for real money games, this becomes an even bigger problem, of course. But in the cases of all games, it can lead to a lot of frustration and abandonment from your legitimate players. Now, ensuring a fair and equal gaming environment that rewards the effort put into your games is critical. So cheaters have a wide range of tools available to them to abuse your microservices, particularly. Especially they've got their automation tools, their scripting tools. With this, cheaters are able to, if you've got sort of a game where you can farm resources, they can script playing a game to gain more resources. Strategy games are vulnerable to cheat bots where fake matches are played to gain ranks on the leaderboards. And ensuring that no one can tamper with your input, your telemetry, and your scores. It's a really critical factor when you're building out these games, because again, your players, they trust you. When they download your game, they're saying, I trust you, I want to play this game. And it's the same thing if you walk into a store. You're expecting your shopping experience to be, I go over here, I pick something up, I take it to the cash register, I give you my money, I leave, and no one mugs me along the way, right? That's very different. And it's the same thing with a game. I'm going to go to the App Store, I want to download your game, I want to play it, I have fun, I want it to be fair, I want it to be the game experience I expect, and then I repeat, I keep playing, I keep coming back to your store, I keep coming back to your game. So again, keeping cheaters at bay is again another critical thing to take into account whenever you're designing your game. So finally, we have what I consider to be the largest threat of all. And it blends a bit with cheaters, and these are the fraudsters, right? So this is the really the criminal element. And when your game represents a significant amount of money, either in the form of microtransactions or subscriptions, fraudsters are going to try to steal your player accounts, and they use targeted account takeovers, and they use that to sell accounts on marketplaces. And again, we're going to have a whole session in about a month or later this month actually, where we dive deeper into this. But if you just go online, marketplaces are selling more and more hacked accounts, and your players, they might reuse their passwords, they might reuse their usernames, and this makes them really vulnerable to a lot of the very kind of simple passwordless attacks that criminals use. And the thing to keep in mind about criminals is they're always looking for the easiest score. And so whatever you can do to make their life a little bit more difficult and make your accounts a little bit more difficult to hack, they're going to move on to easier accounts. Now, we've got a lot of data to support this at Akamai. We have, for the last 2 years, put out a security report specifically on the video games industry. We call it the State of the Internet Security Report. And this past year, in a report called Gaming in a Pandemic, we found that web app attacks targeting the games industry rose by 340% over the past year during the pandemic. And credential stuffing attacks, right? So these are the ones that are specifically targeted at hacking player accounts. They rose by 224%. Now, on top of that, last year, we also worked with what was then DreamHack. It's now ESL Gaming. We did a study with 1,250 something of their hardcore gamers. This was in Europe, but the results are, I think, still pretty useful. Now, over 50% of these players said that one of their gaming accounts had been hacked. And it's worth noting that we further said, well, who should be responsible for cybersecurity? And a lot of them said me, 67% of them said, I'm responsible for it. But also, since it was multiple answer, 76% of them said that the gaming company should be responsible for security, right? So the players are saying, hey, I owe some responsibility in making sure I have a strong password, but they're looking to you who's building games, like they're looking to you for your leadership and protecting their accounts and their data. They're looking for your partnership. So as you build out your game, you need to make certain that you're evaluating your security partners. And you know, as a security vendor, I always say, call it a partner, but really, you know, that's more than a marketing term. It's more than a business development term when we say we want to be your partner. You really need someone who has the depth of knowledge and the ability to help you out quickly in a crisis. You need to have someone that you trust, that you know when you pick up the phone or you get on chat, someone's going to be there to help you. And just for security in the gaming industry, you really can't rely on checkbox security. You need that depth of partnership and the depth of security knowledge to deal with these threats. And here's a little bit of that survey data. Again, I'm really not doing so well. Sorry, everyone, it's 6:30 in the morning here at advancing these slides. So I'll leave that up for a second. But I'm a little done talking about security right now. And we're going to kind of close out here because, you know, I've said a lot that perhaps some of you know a little bit, some of you know a lot, maybe some of you know all of it. That's fine. Come back again for future sections where we really get in depth. But I know that your game takes a ton of effort to develop, and having a strong infrastructure can really help you take your game to the next level, right? Your players demand and they deserve the best experience, and they want to see their accounts and their data protected for harm, right? So they're really looking for your leadership here. So, you know, with that leadership in mind, again, we've taken you on a little bit of a journey on how a well-architected, scalable, and secure gaming infrastructure can help you power up your game. And your gamers, if you do this, they're going to reward you with commitment and dedication, because players, they not only love games, but they love to love their games, right? And you see that all the time when you look at social media and you look at social networks and how people just really get into, and they like getting into the things that they're into. And you know, they're going to reward you if they have a good experience by just coming back for more. You know, and Akamai, we can really help you reach your audience with you know, our intelligent edge platform, and act as a shield from those who wish you and your players harm. So that's all the time I want to spend on the presentation today. Again, and I've said it like 4 times now, but this session is only the start. Over the next month, we're going to host further sessions with people who are more technical than me, more knowledgeable than me. We're just going to get better. We're going to get deeper. And so thank you so much for your time listening to me today. And then what I want to do is I want to turn it back over to Nikhil, and Nikhil and I are going to have a little conversation. So let me get this presentation out of our way.
Yep. Wow, thanks a lot, John, for the wonderful introduction to this session. And I think we are off to a great start to this event. And guys, Gaming Masterclass is going to introduce you to a ton more detail about you know, your gaming infrastructure and security. So stay tuned. We are going to have 4 more sessions, and at the end of this session, we will be having a fireside chat as well, wherein you will get to meet the industry veterans. And yeah, John, I think that was a wonderful presentation, and personally, even I got to learn a lot from this presentation. So thanks a lot for that. Over to you. Anything that you want to ask and take this conversation forward?
Oh yeah, so cool. Now it's my turn to not talk, but I'll talk a little bit by asking you some questions, because this is our first chance. I mean, we've spoken before this, but this is like our first chance to sort of be online together and really get into it. So, you know, every time, like, one of my favorite parts about my job, and I didn't even really introduce myself. So now that the presentation is done, you can hear the intro to me. So I've been at Akamai for almost 9 years, it's been 8.5 years. And for more than half of that, I've been covering the video games industry. I've been playing games since I was a kid, and essentially, I'm the senior strategist for the games industry, and I help kind of talk to customers, and I help our sales teams out, and I help direct some of the content we build to sort of express our knowledge in the industry. So I get to do a lot of this, which is really fun. One of my favorite parts about this is talking to people like you, who I think are way more interesting than me. You know, I get to serve as a way to facilitate other people's coolness, is how I see my job. So I want you to tell me about yourself. And I understand a lot of the people who are watching right now are your regular viewers, but we've also made sure to invite a lot of people as well. So there may be, a good deal of folks who are listening right now who don't know you that well.
Sure.
So I'd like for you to tell me a little bit about yourself and your start in gaming, because I think it's a cool story. And then we can talk a little bit about Gamion and the platform itself.
Sure, sure. So I just would like to chip in and mention that we already crossed 1,000 views. So just would like to tell everyone, whoever is watching, just hit the like button and make sure you share this session, because there's a ton of value to add from Akamai side in this gaming masterclass. Now coming back to me, well, my name is Nikhil Malankar, as you might have already noticed from my channel's name. I run this company called Gamion Studios. I don't know where should I point. Okay, here, Gamion. And
There you go.
I've been passionate about games ever since I was a little kid. When I was a 3-year-old kid, I remember my dad had bought this system which had Windows 95 operating system on it, and just one game, Doom, the classic old Doom. And I got to introduced to the world of gaming from him, and I wasn't really serious about making something of my own back in the day. I was just interested in playing games, but eventually that passion started developing into or converting into passion of making games. I started my first modding career by modding this game called GTA Vice City. I'm sure everyone has played that game. And from then I developed interest on actually modifying the game files, which I had no real intention with that either. But one fine day, a friend of mine comes over at my place, and we were just transferring photos of a school trip that we had gone on. And then therein I show him this game, this mod version of GTA Vice City, and he asked me one simple question: Nikhil, if you can do this, if you can mod a game, then why not make a game by yourself? Why not make a game by yourself, wherein you will be introducing your city, your Mumbai city, to the audience? Because we play games based on Miami City, we play games based on Manhattan. Why not Mumbai? And that got me thinking, and that was the instant of creation of this idea of actually wanting to make games by ourselves and starting Gamion. So yeah, that's a small intro about me.
That's fantastic. And so tell me a little bit about Mumbai Gullies, because and where it's at, because I know that a lot of the people watching are really excited, and you had sort of said, oh, we're gonna have to turn off chat to start this, because everyone, that's all you're going to see in the chat is where is it. So people are excited. So let's tell the people who don't know about it a little bit about it, and then
Sure.
we'll go.
Thanks a lot for that small plug. Actually, Mumbai Gullies is an open world game based on our beloved Mumbai city, because Mumbai, I believe, is the second only city next to New York that is called as the City of Dreams. So it's a game that is very close to my heart, and we had announced this project way back in November 2020. I think, and then the first teaser was released on January 20. No, it was November 2020. Yeah, and then in January 2021 we released a trailer. Since then till now we haven't shown any kind of gameplay to the audience, primarily because it's a big game and we wanted to take our time. So I'm very happy to announce to the audience that Mumbai Gullies is actually going to be showcased at IGDC next week. IGDC, for those who don't know, it's the Indian Game Developers Conference, and it is the largest game developers conference from India and Southeast Asia. So yeah, that's where Mumbai Gullies will be showcased. So make sure you guys register on IGDC. And you will catch me over there as well. About the game itself, it's an open world game. It shows a story of a character who rises from rags to riches, and it's got a soul of its own. It's got some really interesting Mumbai stuff that you can do. You can have a vada pav inside the game. You can go out on action chase sequences. We are internally we are calling this that we are actually going to Bollywoodize the gameplay. So that's something that is extremely unique to the game. And we believe that the game has 3 strong pillars. One is the Bollywoodization aspect. Second is, and I haven't talked about this extensively, but second is the storyline itself, which revolves around a lot of loss and tragedy that happens in the main protagonist's life. And the third aspect is discovery, because why not? Who wouldn't like to roam around the streets of Mumbai? So yeah, that's to sum it up. That's about Mumbai Gullies in brief.
Fantastic. And actually that announcement that it's going to be shown next week wasn't just news to your audience, it was news to me. So I'm glad I asked. So cool. So, tell me a little bit about what some of your top priorities were, on any of your projects, but in particular on this one. Talk about what you went through when you were deciding product market fit, or is it all just sort of dreams? Tell me a bit about your process here.
Yeah, I mean, so whenever we think about a project, we always make sure that we do some bit of market validation for it. So for Mumbai Gullies, I'll just take example of Mumbai Gullies. The market validation for us was releasing the trailer itself. Now, Mumbai Gullies is a big game, but when we do mobile games, there is always this factor of retention. If you want to make a mobile game successful, you always need to make sure that the retention of that game is really high. That is in terms of the single player games, but when it comes to the multiplayer aspect of games, let's say if we are making a multiplayer game, then obviously choosing the right infrastructure is very important, because when we were discussing this offline, you also always mentioned that deciding your structure from day one itself is very critical, because you may never know in this day and age uh, when your game catches up and reaches a million concurrent users. Something that was very apparent with Among Us. Nobody could see that coming. Even Ludo King, for that matter, Ludo King, I think for almost a year or so, it wasn't doing well, and then suddenly something changed, and then eventually that game started getting a lot of traffic that even the developer could not handle. And I'm pretty sure even they made some major infrastructural changes in order to actually accommodate their users, because nowadays people play Ludo everywhere. They play Ludo while commuting to the office. They play Ludo during the pandemic itself. They were used to play Ludo with their friends and families. So a large part of this is completely unaware to the audience how all of this works in the back end, and that I think is very interesting to learn about through this gaming masterclass. So yeah.
Fantastic. So, you know, what kind of advice do you have for folks? Because we've got folks on the line who are from really established companies. We've got folks who are sort of in the upswing. We've got a lot of folks that are either just starting and maybe even just dreaming right now. So, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think the major advice is to, when you're running a company, obviously to make sure that you have a decent amount of cash flows. But the second major advice is to always plan how you can get retention and how you can track your games. Because this is one of the major mistakes that I had done while starting my career. We used to just launch the games and never used to think about all these external infrastructures, be it a multiplayer game, be it like a single player experience. And the biggest mistake that we did initially was that we never included any kind of analytics within our game. Now, this made us completely blind towards the performance of our games. We never used to know how our game is performing. Let's say, for example, if our game has 10 levels and a user is getting stuck on fifth level, and no amount of users are able to progress to the sixth level. So we used to just launch the game and have absolutely no idea about how the game is performing. We used to just rely on Play Store reviews, and that is extremely limited amount of data that we could work with. So that was something of a extreme blind spot for us. So one of the major advice is obviously rely more on data, because that is your best friend and that will really guide you towards making decisions for your game. And I think listening to the users is also a secondary part, but more than listening to the users, if you listen to the data, I think that would add much more value to the improvisation structure of your game. Another core thing that we learned recently was how important is setting proper funnels for your game. So this the same thing that I mentioned about level progression, that also happens on a micro level. Let's say, for example, you have started a game, you're on the main menu, and sometimes what happens is a lot of people are not even able to understand the main menu itself. So you need to establish those proper funnels in order to properly track the user. I think those are the two core takeaways. One is never run out of money, and the second one is always understand how your users are playing your game by the usage of data analytics.
Never run out of money. I think that's just words to live by in general, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about telemetry, because it's something that I spoke about earlier. And making sure that you're able to funnel player data, building that from your game, and making sure that you're keeping track of that. And I'll kind of add on top of that. And I know it's supposed to be you talking, but sometimes I can't help myself. And that's I was with one of the biggest AAA publishers in the world, and they showed me a chart and they said, this is a mobile game that you would all recognize. It's played by lots and lots of people. And they said, here is the graph on time to play. And here's what an A/B test looks like with two lines when we adjusted our menu this way. and adjusted our menu this way, right? And it's like, and so here are the steps that we go through to determine what's the fastest path for a player from download to being in the game and enjoying it. And like, and they're constantly tweaking that. And so they've always got to have a data funnel coming back from their game. And so it's again, like that's a key microservice, and you really want that up and running. So that's that piece. As far as, never running out of money, and this is something that I think is going to be near and dear to a lot of the folks. Where do you find balance between the technical needs, right? Because I can sit here and talk a lot about infrastructure, and people can say, well, that's some pretty expensive infrastructure, so where do you find the balance between like the right points where it's like, this is what I have, this is what I can afford now, this is what I'm going to turn on later, here's where I want to get to, like how do you make some of those decisions? And I know it's a little bit of a vague question, but let's see what we can get with it.
I think when we were not that big, we could rely on these free tools that were available. So for example, for the data analytics part, we rely on Firebase. And for just getting started, I think Photon Unity networking, that is an amazing tool to get started with, because that just helps you kickstart your operations and you can get a multiplayer game up and running really quickly. Where I think where Akamai and all the big players can come into is actually start optimizing that data for you. So Akamai can actually help you reduce cost, because at a granular level, at a small micro level, it would not really matter about the cost, because those might not be that expensive. But then when you reach million concurrent users, I'm pretty sure the costs start stacking up. And that is exactly when Akamai can step in and they can help you out optimizing those costs. But as a starting point, I think there are a great amount of free tools available out there that can actually help you create these user behavior funnels. The ones that we used at our studio was Firebase, Unity Analytics. There was also, for a little bit of time, we used Flurry, because that was also giving us real-time data as well as offline user data. In terms of the network multiplayer part, we haven't used Unity networking as of yet, but that's also something that players can get started with. Apart from that, I think Photon Unity networking is something that people can also rely on. And additionally, if you are a network expert, maybe you can also code up your own server and create your hosting services, and then start hosting your game online that way as well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And Unity is, of course, a great call out. They're a partner of ours, and we work pretty closely with them on a number of things. So yeah, that's a good call out. So I've asked you a bunch of questions so far. We haven't really dove into security too much, and that's because I tend not to ask people who run game studios about their security posture publicly, because there are really good reasons not to talk about that. So I do want to touch on the topic as lightly as possible, which is like, are there any security recommendations that you want to give folks in any of the realms, griefers, fraudsters, cheaters? Like, is there sort of any general advice that you want to put out without revealing anything about your own security posture?
Sure. I mean, when we had started our making games, we used to have this leaderboards incorporated within our games. And this is something that I also recognized, is that, in terms of our own games, we used to face a lot of people who were actually gaming the leaderboards and trying to come on top of it. So that was something we could tackle, because Google had incorporated their own set of solutions post that. I think prior to that, we primarily use Unity Game Engine for the development of our mobile games. So in Unity Game Engine, there are a lot of assets available nowadays, and that can help you actually tackle these issues. But pretty sure on the server side of things, when the security aspect is something that you would be an expert on, and I would love to know from you about what can be the use cases, or without naming any studios, what were the challenges or security threats that you have seen till now, and what were the solutions that perhaps Akamai provided?
Yeah, sure. So, your breaking up a little bit on my end, so I think I caught your question though. So I'll keep going. Let me know in the chat if I'm the one who has frozen. Oh, though I don't know if you'd be able to do that.
You're fine. It's just my internet connection, which was improper.
Okay, got it. All right, cool. We're back on then. All right, I'll answer this question, and then after that, I think that we should open it up to the chat as well for some questions. So, so I'm going to talk about a couple different types of security challenges, and so at Akamai, we've got a pretty broad range of security products. But if you talk about like things that have happened to studios, is we work with. I'll give a couple examples. Let's talk about like griefers and folks who want to knock over a game. Like we've got big anti-DDoS solutions that can really help you on a number of different levels. We protect some of the biggest platforms and publishers in the world. In particular, there's a company that runs the multiplayer servers for one of the biggest online FPSs in the world. And, you know, they are getting hit about 5 times a day. And I'm not talking about like just on an individual server level. We're talking about big attacks. And I could show you at some point maybe some anonymized data, but they're getting hit on a daily basis. But their players don't notice because of, you know, our Prolexic routed solution, where we just kind of send it, like we get this hit with this huge volume of traffic. We send it through a scrubbing center. We pull out the malicious traffic. We let the legitimate traffic through. People get to play. For Prolexic, there's a little bit of a slowdown on service, but that's better than just not being able to play at all. So that's one of the things we do. Another is that, you know, there are some big gaming platforms that say used to, you know, go down around the holiday season, and they don't anymore. And, you know, we're one of the reasons for that. Then there's, you know, it's really risen in the last couple of years, this real problem around credential stuffing, around bot attacks, and basically using large bot networks to try to hack as many accounts as possible. And we've got a product called Bot Manager that we can use to really help mitigate a lot of that and filter out the bad bots and make them stop. And this happens to pretty much everyone, you know, so you'll see it in the news sometimes like, oh, this small game that I've never heard of had like 1 million players hacked. And then also we've got some of the folks that come to us, like one of the biggest publishers in the world came to us and said, hey, and this was last summer, we just through our community have been getting a bunch of reports that people's accounts are getting hacked. We're not sure what it is. Can you help us with this? So we turned on Bot Manager and we discovered that 99.5% of their authentication traffic were not players, they were bots. Yeah. Right? So that's over 3 billion bot attacks.
Yeah.
So, and that, because I've talked to other people across the business, like who work with our financial services customers, because we work with the biggest banks in the world and our other media and entertainment customers, they're like, yeah, it's not uncommon. Oh my God, that's a lot, right? So when I first saw that, I was pretty shocked, but yeah, we're, you know, and it's the kind of thing that I'm nervous talking about publicly, because it's like, you're lying. 99.5% of their authentication traffic, and internally people are like, sometimes it's higher. All right, but you know, when you build a big game, this is what you have to deal with, right? So these are the problems you can look forward to when your game is a big success. And when you're ready for that, come and work with us. So we see a ton of different stuff. And again, when we do the whole section on criminal economics, we'll dive into how criminals operate, why they operate just like they have standard enterprise operations, which is a little terrifying. They're very advanced in the way that they operate. You know, how they're structured, how they make money, how reputation plays into it. We'll get into all of that and the different main vectors that they use to attack your players. And I could rattle it off now, but I'm wary of our time, so I want to make sure we open this up to chat. So again, come back for the security session. It's going to be a banger. Like, it's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, let me stop talking about that now.
So guys, I'm now opening the chat. You can ask anything, any questions, except when is Mumbai Gullies coming. Please feel free to ask Jonathan anything about security. And stay tuned to the next sessions as well, because we are going to learn a lot about security. We are going to have a lot of fun learning about how these bot attacks are planned, and we'll get to learn a little bit about criminology as well, I hope. So yeah, guys, I have opened the chat. I hope you guys are able to type. Okay, so Josh Paul has written a hello. Hello, Josh. So if you guys have any questions related to Akamai and their services, please feel free. So Jonathan, meanwhile, we can do a small impromptu chat.
All right. Do you want to hear any more about security? Because I can go on, but actually, I want to sort of hear your reaction to what I just said about security, right? As someone who is building your own game, has built your own games, like, what is this? Just hearing the basics, what does this make you think? And what more do you want to hear from me? So I'm going to take the time now to interview you about.
So I think I learned a lot of amazing things. Okay, I think we've got a very interesting question. I think before we get to that, I think there's a question from how do hackers get around two-factor authentication? That's something that you are aware of?
That is a fantastic question. So I'm gonna talk about this in two parts.
Yeah.
The first is the importance of using multi-factor authentication and two-factor authentication in general. We offer this at Akamai for enterprises, but not for player base. So I'm speaking about this not as something we sell for your purposes. So the first thing is that there are ways to get around MFA. It can be hacked. I'm not going to talk too in depth about it because there's, as a security professional, you don't want to talk too much in certain forums about how to do something exactly. Suffice it to say, you could Google it. There are different types of MFA that are better than others. So SMS based is kind of the weakest, and then there are like increasingly good forms of MFA. But the more important point to this question, rather than like how do I get around MFA, is why MFA is important in the first place, and that's because it is possible to hack MFA, but no one's going to do it. All right. And so that's something really important to learn, is that criminals go for the low hanging fruit. And so they buy lists of passwords for like by the hundreds, by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. They buy account information and they buy it cheaply, like $5 here, like $5 for like a ton of passwords and usernames that they can put into a program and just start brute forcing their way into accounts, right? And the thing is, they buy these big lists and they crack all the ones that don't have MFA, and they go down the list, and anyone that has MFA, they pop into a bucket and resell it to someone else. Right? So like they're going to go through and they're going to strip the value where they can. And MFA, it's just like, that's too hard, not worth my time. I'm going to go on to the next account, because they're just trying to make money as quickly as possible. The place where MFA is important is in putting yourself into the too difficult to hack or too difficult to hack quickly list is actually what it's about. Stronger MFA types are more important as you get into like, get into high value accounts. If you're like a pro streamer, you probably want to make sure that the games you play have like, and you make a lot of money, you probably want to make sure that no one's going to get into that account. And you want to make sure that the company you're working with has like a really solid MFA program. And you want to use MFA everywhere for all of your accounts, because all they need is a bit of information from here to get into your account here. So, the situation in which someone's going to bother hacking someone's MFA is when they're doing really targeted attacks. So you have to ask yourself, if you're an everyday player, like, and, am I going to be one of those targeted attacks, or am I just going to be on a list of passwords? And for most people, you're just going to be on the list. So there we go. Okay. Sorry that I didn't tell you how to hack MFA, but I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. So this was asked by Ghost Web, primarily because he got hacked even after enabling in 2FA. So anyway, so we've got another question by a user called Peace. He says, how do companies handle the situation if there is a security breach in something that they've made?
how do they handle it if there's a security breach? So it depends on the type of breach, but assuming that it's a data breach, a company will have to scramble very quickly to discover, like, where's the breach? When did it probably happen? Where did someone have lateral access? Because that's the problem with a lot of infrastructures, and this is something we talk about a lot at Akamai. It's called zero trust, right? So zero trust is making sure that anyone, no matter where they have access to your systems, have least privilege, and they only have access to the apps that they need access to. And it's a security model that the industry is moving to as a whole, rather than just like you get into the account and you can go anywhere. And a lot of the more simple infrastructures, once someone gets in, they can get anywhere, right? And so that's what you want to avoid. That's why you want to move to a zero trust model. But what you do is you figure out, okay, so I've identified the point where when they enter, and I'm not a pen tester, right? So I'm not a penetration tester. I'm not like, we'll bring someone on later who's done that deep type of security research, who can give you an even better response. So please come back for that session. It's gonna be fun. But you got to find it. Where do they come in? Where could they get to from there? And then you have to determine, okay, so these are the potential files that have been accessed. These are the potential accounts and account information that's been accessed. And we need to notify our players. Are we going to do it publicly? Are we going to do it one-on-one? We need to immediately mitigate. We need to get people changing their passwords. So there's like a really standard list of things to do. OWASP is a really good reference. That's OWASP, if you don't know. And they've got a lot of information on how to handle some key security challenges as well. So I hope that was enough of an answer and not another non-answer, but yeah.
Yeah. So Ayush Swami has asked one question: is Firebase good for multiplayer games and databases? And additionally, I would like to add, if you would know anything from the Akamai bucket that could help answer this question as well.
For multiplayer. Okay, so I will leave the question about those particular products to you. What I can say about multiplayer and how Akamai can help is that when you think about gameplay traffic, there are two kind of core ways that traffic is delivered. There's HTTP and there's UDP. So UDP, Akamai does not do performance solutions around yet. And there aren't CDNs who do it. So UDP traffic is just kind of fast on its own by the nature of the way it's architected. It doesn't rely on what we call the three-way handshake like HTTP does. That three-way handshake gives reliability to your traffic, but it takes a little bit off of performance. And that's the way most internet traffic is, because it was built for that sort of reliability, not for the speed. There's a joke that the U in UDP stands for unreliable. And that's because it's just like fire and forget, and the packets might get there, they might not. When you're doing an application like streaming or video or games, like that's where some of the pixelation might come in. It's not just a rendering speed problem, but sometimes the pixels, like, they just don't show up, right? The data packets just don't show up. So all of this to say, HTTPS, if you're running a game that is asymmetric, right, as opposed to like it's a first-person shooter, you want to use UDP for first-person shooters. But if you're doing something like like Clash of Clans does, where it's completely asymmetric, HTTP traffic, and I'm not saying this is what Supercell does, HTTP traffic is totally fine if you're doing a card game or a board game. That's all totally fine, and we can help with the performance of all of that. So that's the long-winded answer.
Got it. And there is a very interesting question from this username called Dead Believer, and this is what I love about the internet, that you can have any random usernames. So lovely username. How frequent is it for hackers to try and hack studios' data and use it for ransom?
So, wow, I wish I could remember the statistic that I saw just yesterday. So ransomware attacks are going up tremendously. And particularly in the last year, I think that ransomware for a while was sort of an occasional attack. But I think that it's become easier to do for more people, so that the access to ransomware tools has sadly become democratized, and it's no longer, oh, this really super smart, super clever hacker like came in and encrypted all of our data and is ransoming it. And now it's like, oh, some guy bought a tool for like $10 off another criminal, and now they're using it and to see if they can get in and get all my stuff. So it's becoming more and more of a threat. It's becoming more and more democratized. The criminal element, the particularly organized ones, are even trying to actually be careful now, like who they do this to, because they don't want to mess up their own lives by disrupting some vital systems. But when you look at like cross-nation actors, it's getting pretty bad out there. So I don't have an exact percentage on like how much it has risen, but it was a percentage in the tens. I feel like in the last year it was like in the 50% range. I just saw yesterday. I'm sorry that I can't remember the figure. Akamai did just buy a company called Guardicore to help with ransomware. So I don't know if this question was a plant or not, but thanks for asking it. But seriously, we just bought a great company called Guardicore, and they're coming online, and they've got some really cool anti-ransomware.
Cool. So I think we are running short on time, so we'll take one last question for the day.
We're short.
And then
Let's do it.
Yeah. So the question is, do small games made by small game developers need security too, or only big and major games?
Yeah, I mean, everyone needs security. I know it feels like it's a really exciting time, and you can just like get a smaller game and get it out there and get it out into the world. If you're not going to do security, you need to be really careful about what you're going to collect from your players and what kind of information you're going to demand, because even if they have, if you store your usernames and passwords in plain text and someone grabs it, people reuse their usernames and passwords all the time, and that information that you put out, someone will break in, because they're the big criminal outfits that are going after the big publishers. There are smaller hackers that do that too. But when people are like, I'm going to figure out this hacking thing, and I'm gonna see how much money I can make, I'll try this little game here. They're going to get that, and they're going to grab the information, and they're going to sell it, and they're going to be like, cool, I made $100 selling that. Yeah. I'm going to do more of this. So yeah, everyone needs security. The last thing I'll say on it, so I don't go on forever, is that you need to balance player experience with security. That's a big thing. And then you also need to balance security with cost, and what can you afford, and what is the key data that you need to protect, right? So if all you're asking for someone to play your game is username and password, make sure it's not stored in plain text, make sure it's encrypted, make sure it's secure. That's the core thing that you need to protect. If you're going to start doing transactions, it gets exponentially more complicated. Right.
So guys, I have opened a small poll in the chat. Please let me know if you found this session helpful, and if you have any kind of feedback or whatever you want to see in the upcoming gaming masterclass, do let us know. We'll make sure that we try to accommodate those feedbacks as well. Thanks Jonathan. I think today's session was a wonderful kickstart to this before they press start button. And guys, we are going to organize more sessions like these, so stay tuned. Stay subscribed, and go ahead, check out Akamai's website and take a look at all the solutions that they are offering. And I'm pretty sure if you guys end up making the next Among Us or the next PUBG or BGMI, I'm pretty sure you will need Akamai services. So that's it from my side. Jonathan, any parting words from your side?
I just want to thank everyone so much for your time today. I know it's a little late in the day for you, as it is early for me, and I appreciate everyone sticking around. Fantastic questions. Come back for the next session. Keep those questions coming. We love these conversations. And if you have questions for me, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's my social network of choice. I try to avoid the others as much as possible for these days. So please find me, send me questions. It's all good. I'm friendly, so let's do it.
Awesome. So Jonathan, I'm just putting your LinkedIn link in the chat. So, and cool. A lot of people are actually appreciating today's session. So thanks a lot for educating us about this, and guys, looking forward to more such sessions from Jonathan and industry veterans alike. So guys, thanks a lot for watching. We will catch up again. I think, when is the next session? Is it on 13th? or 15th?
I think they're firing. No, it's no, it's in. I think it's in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So guys, I'll be making announcement for the next session shortly.
It's in
Stay tuned, and I hope you guys had a wonderful time watching this session. Thanks a lot for watching. Press the subscribe button so you don't miss the next videos, and have a great evening ahead.
Subscribe and like.